Hey all, so today's video we're going to be going over the second half of our two acronyms on mnemonics. First video we talked about RICE or PRICE, which is the what to do when we've got an injury. This time we'll be going over the other one, which is H.A.R.M, and this is what not to do when we've got an injury. Now it's important to keep in mind that this applies primarily within the first 72 hours or so of the injury, what we call the acute phase of the injury. And H.A.R.M's not quite as hard and fast rules as RICE is. There is a little bit more variability, so there's sometimes where some of the things we're talking about actually don't apply to certain injuries and things like that. We'll mention some exceptions, but these are generally good things to keep in mind. So getting on to things, like with our previous video, we're using this acronym, so rather than RICE, this time we're looking at H.A.R.M, so H-A-R-M. H is, in this case, is heat. Now we talked about ice previously. Ice is good because it reduces the amount of blood flow we're getting to an area. It's really good for pain relief. A lot of the times heat's kind of the opposite for the opposite reasons. So it's not good because we're increasing the amount of blood flow to an area, which sounds great if you're thinking about healing times and stuff like that, but if we've got a fresh injury, we don't want to be bringing too much inflammatory markers and things to the area. We don't want to be really increasing that peripheral blood flow. We want to be trying to be reducing that down, helping with the pain, reducing the swelling. So things like ankle injuries, knee injuries, basically lots of joint injuries. Heat in the first 72 hours or so isn't the best. We do use it sometimes. When we're managing, oftentimes we'll alternate ice and heat and things like that, but we have a little bit more knowledge on when we can safely do that. As a general rule, if something's injured, ice it. Now the biggest exception to that does tend to be lower back injuries. Backs tend to like heat a lot more than they do ice. There's a lot of muscles, a lot of little muscles around through there, and the ice often leads to those contracting a little bit and can actually increase pain. So for lower back injuries, start with the ice. If it's really uncomfortable, then heat's not a bad idea there. But for anything peripheral, anything in the lower limb or upper limb, ice, not heat. Our next one, our A, is alcohol. So this one might seem like a bit of a strange one to have in there, but it is really important that with acute injuries, you're avoiding alcohol. Now, there's a number of reasons for this. Alcohol does impair somewhat the ability to clot. So if you blood to clot, which is really important for obviously open wounds, but also if you've torn a ligament or something like that, there's going to be quite a lot of bleeding inside the joint. And we want to try and minimize that. The other side is alcohol does what you'd expect it to do. It significantly impairs your decision making. So rolling an ankle, having a nasty ankle injury, and then going out, getting the sauce, going to town after that, you're probably going to be, you're not going to be feeling that injury as much. It does have some anesthetic properties or analgesic properties, depending on how we want to talk about it. So you're not feeling the pain as much as your body would probably like you doing, which sounds like a good thing until you realise that you're not feeling it, and that's letting you do stuff that you really don't want to be doing on it, as well as making silly decisions. So you're more likely to do something that you probably shouldn't with an acute injury. The other thing is that because alcohol has a lot of different effects on your central nervous system, one of the things it does tend to do is it actually increases, a little bit like heat does, it increases the blood flow to peripheral areas, so to the extremities. Again, that can increase swelling, increase pain, bring more inflammation and things around through to the area. Just a lot of things we want to avoid. Generally we say, if you can avoid it entirely for at least the first day or so, fantastic. Don't go overboard. There's about, the main rule, 12 beers after a nasty ankle injury is not going to end well. But just be sensible with that. So H, heat, A, alcohol, R. Now R, if you're looking this up, we'll have a couple of different things in there for R. I've seen running used, I've seen re-injury used. We're going to say re-aggravation. What that means is basically don't aggravate the injury, don't make it worse, effectively try not to piss it off. So for something like an ankle injury, then running is a really useful art there, really. We want you moving a little bit with the injury and trying to get things going, but we don't want you doing stuff that's really aggravating it. The whole no pain, no gain thing that you've probably heard about, doesn't apply when we're dealing with acute injuries here. We want to minimise that pain, especially for this, again, this acute period, this first 72 hours or so. Minimise that, get things going, but not in ways that aggravate things. Incredibly important with more major injuries, because it's not just about potentially bringing on more pain and more inflammation to the area. With major knee injuries, for instance, you can do a lot more structural damage if you try and, say, play through, or you ignore RA and get horrifically drunk, go into town, trip on the knee. When the area is compromised, it's not as strong as it should be. Those ligaments are not going to be doing the jobs properly. They're not going to be stopping the joint going from where we don't want it going. So you're a lot more at risk of further injury there. So being sensible to avoid that re-aggravation is really, really important. We touched on that at the end of the last video, but very, very important thing not to do. So H, heat. A, alcohol. R, re-aggravation. M. Now this one might come up as a bit of a surprise to some people. M is massage. And I can, almost see a bunch of people going, that's weird. Go to the physio, they do a lot of massage. Massage is useful when it's useful. Sounds again like a bit of a cop-out, but again in this first period after an injury, we don't want to be, again, increasing that blood flow to the area. We don't want to be doing that kind of stuff. Massage does that really, really well. It can help a bit with pain, but the main effects of it are to increase blood flow to the area. It helps with healing times, has some more complicated interactions to do with how the pain signals come into the spinal cord, but that's another much more complicated video. But especially larger muscle groups, things like calf injuries or hamstring tears or quad injuries, early massage there is just going to increase swelling, it's going to increase the bleeding into the muscle. It's not going to do anything useful. It's probably not going to help much with pain. It'll probably do the opposite, it'll probably make things worse. Rather than the massage, icing, compression, those things we talked about in the last video, those are what we want to be doing in these acute periods. Again, there are some things that we will, especially people coming to clinic, we will use massage and other soft tissue techniques on early, but we know when to be doing that. It's a little bit more complicated than I can go over in a short video, but again, for the most part, avoid that massage early on, in those early stages. So running quickly through again, H, heat. Some exceptions, lower backs, generally stick twice. A, alcohol. You can avoid it after an injury, avoid it after an injury. Nothing good's going to come of that. R, re-aggravation. Don't aggravate it. Injuries, you've done it once. No point doing it a second time, especially if it's going to be worse than the last time. And M, massage. Leave it alone. Hands off for a little while. Go through our riser or price. Just get things going with that. After that 72 hours, then we start to manage things quite differently, but the management over the first phase, over that acute phase, is really important. That will set you up for a much quicker recovery if you're doing everything well there. It will, you get through that phase a lot easier if you're managing things well, if you're icing things regularly, if you're taking pain relief if you need it, and if you're not doing our list of things here and you're not making things worse. Cheers for watching, guys. So we'll continue the series next week. 100% sure what we'll be looking at now, but we'll be continuing this injury prevention and injury management series. There's a few other things we want to look at, including use of slings, splints, things like that, some basic strapping techniques, as well as what to look for in general first aid situations. Especially important for us is rugby situations. If you've got a physio on the field, no one's helping out, what can you do to help, that kind of stuff. Brilliant. Thanks again, guys.